Hey there, my name is Jonathan. I lead developer relations here at Matillion. Today, we're going to take a look at connecting to your APIs with the Data Productivity Cloud. Let's get started. Let's set out a couple of key objectives and give a bit of an overview of what we're trying to achieve today. Let's assume that we're a data engineer at a company. Let's say, let's pick Matillion. We have loads and loads of different SaaS products in use across the business, such as things like Atlassian and, Snowflake, obviously, and, many, many, many more. We need to get data for our product team from a source, in this case, FeatureOS, and get it into our Snowflake warehouse so we can then do analysis. Here's what we're going to be doing today. Let's talk about the key concepts in Custom Connector. We'll do some discovery on the API that we're looking to interact with. We'll check that we have the data prepared that we can then make use of. We'll build out the connector in Custom Connector, and then finally use it within a pipeline. So let's start by talking about a couple of key concepts. It's important to note that there's a few different things you have to know for Custom Connector, and let's start with the most obvious one. Content type. Well, in terms of content type, Custom Connector is designed to operate with a REST API that returns JSON. SOAP APIs, things that return XML, are not currently supported. Pagination, everyone's favorite. Well, you have to make sure that you can get the content back and that you can actually query your API in pages. Many, many, many different kinds of pagination are supported by Custom Connector, things such as path, full path, or link header. And then for security and authentication, well, we all know it is super important to keep your data safe and secure. And again, Custom Connector helps with that. There's many different types of security in Custom Connector, and you can utilize things such as basic auth, API keys, or even OAuth. So now that we understand the key concepts a little bit better, let's look at discovery. There's a couple of things we need to look at. FeatureOS has a public API, and it's pretty well documented. You can take a look at this link. We need to understand what data it is we're looking to retrieve and what really matters to us in regards to this task. Well, we're interested in the usage of our public roadmap. So it stands to reason then that we're likely wanting to pull data on what ideas exist and what is linked to those ideas. What's the up and down vote counts of these ideas? And then who's actually been voting on the ideas? So now, if we link those key concepts we just learned about to what is available in FeatureOS, we can see that we're in a pretty good spot. In regards to content type, the FeatureOS API is RESTful, so we get back JSON anyway. Perfect. In regards to pagination, there's a little bit of work for us to do here. We need to use script pagination, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then for security and authentication, well, the FeatureOS API uses an API key. So we can just use that. Perfect. So now that we have looked at the key concepts of Custom Connector and ensured that the API meets the needs, let's look at data prep. So in regards to data prep, we're already using FeatureOS, so we know that there's loads of data in there already. We're pretty much ready to get started with retrieving it. But we can also use tools such as Postman to interrogate the API ahead of the usage to see what the shape of the data is. We can look at the documentation that, again, I've mentioned is super helpful to see what we need. And in this case, we're likely looking at 2, maybe 3 main entities. We're looking for posts, what people are voting on, and the votes, who is actually doing the voting. And there is likely something in regard to external resources as well. So let's switch pace. Let's take a look at the data in Postman. So if I switch over to Postman, and look at the API documentation, we can see I've already got the request ready. I've taken this from the FeatureOS API documentation here. Perfect. Okay, so let's go back to Postman. So I want to see what feature requests there are. I want to sort that data, getting the oldest first, and I want to just get the first page. Perfect. Let's see if this works. Awesome. So the data is in a format we can read, and it looks pretty much perfect. Let's jump back to our slides. So we are now prepared. We've got our data ready. We've completed discovery, and we understand now the key concepts. Let's look at actually building out the connector. So I've already logged into the hub. Let's look at what I need to do to build my custom connector. First, we click on our Manage Custom Connectors. You can also get here by clicking on the menu, heading to Manage, and choosing Custom Connectors. And when we land on this page, we can see that there are no connectors already there. We've already got a massive collection of connectors available for you to take, expand, and build upon. Things such as Amplitude, BugCrowd, or even Confluence. So let's go back and add a connector. We're going to call this FeatureOS. And we know that the endpoint is getAllPosts. Okay, and when we land on this page, we can see that there is no API and there is no authentication type by default. Let me go and prepare that data. Okay, cool. Now I've got my endpoint ready. Let's click send to see what happens. Awesome. I've already got my data now back. It is the same response that I got in Postman, and the structure of the data has been determined. Great. You'll note that we haven't set up pagination yet, and we haven't set up any query parameters. That's totally fine. We'll do that in a moment. So, we are sending a GET request to the endpoint to get back our data. Let's hit save. Cool. Now, you'll note that our authentication is not stored within Custom Connector. We use it here to test your requests. We'll look at that a little bit more when we go to build our pipeline. So let me go and import a previously created connector that has all my endpoints in it. Okay, so I've taken the liberty of importing another version of this connector that I've built in another account. You can see that there are a number of different endpoints now on the left-hand side, such as list all posts, list upvoters, and many more. Some of these need to support pagination. Let's have a quick look at that. So let's pick list external resources. I know that this endpoint doesn't require pagination. So as you can see, no pagination is selected. But if I look at list all posts, you'll see in pagination that we're using script. That means that we're looking at the page in the query. We're saying, okay, cool. Does the page that we got back have content? We'll increment the counter by 1. We'll use that value. And then if the body is empty, we will stop. Perfect. So if I go and get my token and set it in here and try send, you'll see that this works. Perfect. So now if we go back to pagination and look at the bottom, you'll see the test pagination button. So let's click that. Perfect. So our first page is there, and we have 2 and 3. Perfect. We've confirmed that pagination is working as we would expect. Perfect. So let's hit save and go and use that connector. So we've built out our connector. We're kind of ready to go. So now we need to go and use it in a pipeline. So let's jump back to the hub and get a pipeline built. Let's go into Design Data Pipelines. You'll see that I already have a FeatureOS project created, and it only has a main branch. I'm using Matillion hosted Git here. So let's jump into the designer. I'll choose my branch. You'll see that there's nothing here. So in my first pipeline, my first thing that I really want to do is get all the posts. So I can click the plus Have a look from a FeatureOS custom connector. Perfect. Okay, so we now have our FeatureOS connector in the canvas. Let's choose our data source. We want list all posts, and the authentication type we know is API key. Perfect. The key is API key. Again, we got this from the documentation here that tells us API key is the header. And the value is, oh, okay, we need to store our secret. So secrets are managed independently. It's important to note that we have to store our secrets in each project to make sure that they're not exposed. So if we click on Manage, we can go and save our API key to the project. So let's add a secret definition. We're going to call this FeatureOS API key because, well, that's what it is. The API key for accessing FeatureOS. It's not a multi-line input, and we have our value already. Cool. Let's now create the secret. Great. So we now have our secret ready for use. If we jump back to Designer and close the modal and go back into value, you'll see that we now have FeatureOS API key. Perfect. Let's save that. Cool. Now we need to configure. So there are a couple of settings here, and none of which we need to worry about. You can do things like set URI parameters or query parameters that you may have set up in your custom connector. In our case, we don't need to worry about this. We're not setting a page limit. We want back everything. So we can move to destination. The destination in this case is Snowflake. So let's say we want to load it to FeatureOS, or in this case, FOSS, and we'll call it idea. And I'll make sure that I don't interact with anything else I may already have. So we'll call it video. We'll say fail if exists. You have the choice to replace, truncate and insert, or even append to your tables. We're going to just fail if exists. We're going to think we're going to do this once. But we know that in reality, we likely need to do it on a regular cadence. Let's choose user stage. That's totally fine for us. Cool. So you can see that our pipeline is now validated. Let's run that and see what happens. Awesome. And our pipeline is now complete. We can see that it took about, well, say 30 seconds or so. So let's jump in to schemas. Let's take a look at the schema. We're in the JLaw schema because I'm Jonathan. Perfect. And our tables are created. Let's have a look. So we have FeatureOS Ideas video. Now we can't view that data in here. We can do so, however, in a transformation pipeline. So let's do that now. Let's add a transformation pipeline. We'll call it ideas. We don't know what we're going to do yet. Perfect. Let's add a pipeline. And we want a table input. Perfect. The target table is, well, it's the video table. We know that. Perfect. The column names, let's just load the data value because that's all there is. And let's now click sample data to see what that data looks like. Okay, so we can see our data, but it's in JSON format. That's not super helpful. So let's add another component. Let's do extract nested data. Okay, so the columns are, well, the data value. That's all we have. But we can click the autofill button and get the structure back from our table. So we can see feature request element, and all of the extra columns that come through. Perfect. Let's just hit save. And if we click sample data, we can now see that all of our data is in a much nicer format. Let's turn off include input columns. We don't care. We don't want to see those. And, well, we're also going to get rid of some of the columns that seem a little bit noisy. So if we go back in, we can turn off things like the feature requests. We don't care. The actual element one, we don't need that as a separate column. And, well, we'll leave the rest. In fact, we'll turn off success. We don't need that either. Perfect. So if we go back and sample our data now, you can see that we now have much more data, and it's in a much nicer format, ready for us to do additional transformation and additional data insights. So, we've now built out our connector and started to use it in a pipeline. There's so much more you can do. Congratulations, we've got our pipeline ready to go, and we can expand that. So, get signed up for your free trial today at Matillion.com for 500 free credits. Get subscribed to our YouTube channel to keep up to date with all of these insightful videos. And leave a comment if there's anything you want to say to us. We'll catch you again soon. Bye for now.